Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Now, Louisiana is unlike any other place in America. It's a land of water, shadow, heat, old roads, moss-draped cypress, isolated canals, river towns, oil fields, bayous, and deep cultural memory. It's a place where folklore did not remain locked in books or passed down only as superstition. In Louisiana, the old stories seem to live alongside the people. There are swamp monsters and Rougarou legends. There are strange lights over water, phantom vehicles, voodoo and hoodoo traditions, UFO encounters, reptilian humanoids, and witnesses who insist that they experienced was not imagination, a misidentification, or folklore. So tonight, we enter that strange landscape. This is Unexplained Louisiana. Now, we begin in Westlake, Louisiana, with a recent report from April 14, 2026. The witness lives north of Westlake in an area surrounded by swamp, canal water, cypress, palmetto, vines, and thick growth. This home is bordered by this environment on three sides. So he's very familiar with the normal movement and sounds of deer, hogs, and other wildlife in the area. Now, on the evening of April 14th, around 8 p.m., he was working near the bulkhead behind his house. He had been placing hay bales from the upper side of the property when one slipped and fell down toward the swamp below. There was a drop of about 5 to 6 feet from the riprap to the lower ground, so the witness walked roughly 50 yards to reach a safer access point. And as he rounded a large tree, he suddenly saw a very large, dark object standing upright. The figure reacted immediately. It took off, crashing through vines and palmettos as it moved away from him. And at first it headed east, which would have taken it toward dry land. Then it abruptly turned northwest and crossed through the canal, moving through water that would have been waist deep on the average person. The creature became partially obscured by brush and branches once it entered the water, but the witness could still see enough to know it was walking on two legs. He could also hear the movement in the water and recognized it as bipedal. Now, he emphasized that he has lived in the environment for years and knows the difference between the deer, hogs, and other animals as they move through the water. This was not moving like any of them. There were other witnesses present. There were no other witnesses present. But the days leading up to the encounter, the animals around the property have been acting differently. The witness's small dogs was normally attempted to run toward the road or across a patch of trees, had begun stopping at the edge of the yard near the drop-off. They would alert toward the swamps, refuse to leave the driveway, and want to go back inside. Neighbors with animals had noticed similar behavior. Outdoor cats were trying to get inside or staying under cover. The general impression was that the animals sensed something nearby before the witness ever saw the figure. Now, the weather was clear, and it was near dusk. And somewhere in that Westlake swamp, something large, dark, and upright moved away on two legs. Now, that report gives us the first important pattern, the water line. The creature is not simply seen in the woods. It moves through the canal. It travels in the border zone between land and swamp, where ordinary wildlife can disappear quickly and where something large could remain hidden for long periods. Now, this next account comes from South Louisiana, and once again, the witness is near a canal. But this case adds something a bit more unsettling. The feeling of being watched, the sound of movement in the woods, and a series of drum-like beats that seem to control the encounter. Now, the witness was 18 years old and from South Louisiana. He stated that he had never believed in the paranormal before the encounter, and after work, he decided to go fishing for the remainder of daylight. He went to the canal near his home, close to a church. And on his side of the canal, there was a levee leading toward a nature preserve and a highway. And on the other side were woods and a single tree with a warning sign. The witness had fished there many times before, though usually with other people. Each time they visited the spot, they would hear what sounded like a large animal running around in the woods. They always assumed it was a hog, but it never came out into view. And on this day, he was alone. And as soon as he got out of his car, he felt uneasy. He ignored the feeling, hopped over the gate, and walked down to the canal with his fishing poles. Now, at first, everything seemed normal. There were armadillos, birds, and other animals moving around. So he began fishing. About 15 minutes later, he felt the sensation of being watched. But he described it as unlike a normal gaze. It felt as if he were being watched from every direction at once. Then he heard it again, the sound of a giant animal running through the woods. In the distance, he heard an ominous bark. At first, he thought it might have been a dog. But as he walked along the bank and continued casting, the unseen animal followed him. Wherever he moved, it moved. The witness kept looking behind him, beside him, and ahead of him. This continued for about 10 minutes. Then he reached a point where there were marks in the tall, overgrown grass along the bank. That's when he heard it. Boom, boom, boom. He described it as a distant sound of a hollow drum being struck 3 times. Immediately after the drum beats, the animal in the woods became agitated and began running rapidly. The witness was now extremely frightened. He started fishing his way back toward the place where he had left his bag. Then he heard the drum again. This time, boom, boom. The creature moved in front of him. He froze. There was a small opening in the trees. He saw them shake as something walked through and looked at him. He couldn't see its face clearly, only a shadow and one eye staring at him. He described the eye as black, too black, like a portal. The creature then turned away from him. A single drum beat sounded. Boom. Everything went silent. The birds stopped chirping. The witness ran. He ran to his car and drove home. He added that he had grown up in the area and had seen disturbing objects along the trails near the patch of woods by the church. Bloody dresses nailed to trees, upside down crosses carved into them, and baby doll heads with eyes cut out. He insisted he does not smoke, vape, drink, or even use drugs. He ended the report by saying, "What I saw today wasn't human, and sure as hell wasn't an animal." Now, that South Louisiana canal report blends several themes often found in high-strangeness cases: animal silence, the sense of being watched, ritualistic imagery, and an unseen presence that seems to move with intelligence. But there's another layer to Louisiana. The moment a witness describes something large, animalistic, bipedal, and predatory, Louisiana folklore offers a name that has haunted Cajun country for generations: the Rougarou, or as is sometimes known as the Loup Garou. The next account takes us to Oil City, Louisiana, near Cato Lake, and the surrounding swamps and marshlands. Now, the incident took place in Oil City, Louisiana, near Cato Lake, in a landscape of old derricks, swamp, and marshlands. It was early evening. The sun was setting as the night watchman made his way to his post on one of the old derricks. He was new to the job, and the derrick he had been assigned to was far back near the boggy section of the creek, or of the swamp. Now, with no boat available, he chose to walk along the bank. The route would take longer, but he was used to swamp terrain and wanted to make a good impression. Now, as the thick canopy of trees blocked out the fading light, he paused to light a kerosene lantern. Holding it high, he looked into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing. Then he thought he heard movement. He dismissed it as his imagination and continued walking. Soon, he heard it again. This time, it sounded like footsteps mirroring his own, just to the side and behind him. He stopped, turned, and held the lantern high. "Who is that?" he called out. There was no answer. He began walking again, faster this time. The footsteps resumed. Then came the sound of sloshing in the nearby water. The watchman became unnerved. He quickened his pace, catching his feet on exposed cypress root as the steps grew closer. Finally, fear turned into anger. He stopped and shouted, "Who the hell is that?" Again, there was no answer. The swamp went quiet. Then, from the darkness, came a low, deep growl that reverberated in his chest. The watchman ran. He had nothing to defend himself with. His only hope was to reach the old derrick. He ran through the water and muck as something crashed through the undergrowth behind him. The footsteps and splashing followed. When he reached the derrick, he began to climb. He dropped his lantern. He climbed higher as something below him released an unearthly howl. Then the structure began to shake. Whatever was below him circled the derrick, howling and shaking it with tremendous strength. The watchman clung to the crossbeams through the night, terrified, unable to descend. Now, as dawn approached, he heard the thing walk away through the water with slow, deliberate strides. In the dim morning light, he caught a glimpse of a tail, bipedal, canine-like creature moving back into the swamp. Now, below the derrick, he saw footprints in the mud where it had circled him. When he heard the day crew arrive, they had to coax him down. And after hearing his story and seeing the tracks, the men were disturbed. They brought in an older local man who knew the woods, creeks, and bayous. He examined the tracks. His face became serious. Then he asked when he asked what he thought it was, he answered with two words: Loup Garou. Then he pointed toward the tracks leading into the cypress swamp and said, "The Loup Garou is real. It's been a long time since I heard of one around here, but it's real." Now, at this point, we had 3 Louisiana reports connected by water, swamp darkness, and bipedal movement. But not every Louisiana entity fits into the Rougarou or Bigfoot category. Some reports describe something stranger, reptilian, aquatic, humanoid, and fast-moving. Now, this next account comes from August 2016 in Tangipahoa Parish along Interstate 55. Now, in August 2016, I received a text message from a witness and later spoke with him by phone. The man said he had witnessed a lizard man in Louisiana while driving home. Now, I asked him to write down his account and send it to me. This sighting occurred on Wednesday, August 10th, around 11:15 p.m. The witness was driving northbound on I-55 about a half a mile south of Route 10 overpass. He was on his way to Jackson, Mississippi. About 100 yards ahead of him, he saw something crossing the highway from left to right. When his headlights illuminated it, he saw what he described as a walking lizard man. It moved like a human, upright on its feet. Its skin appeared shiny and greenish brown. It had a huge thick tail that reached the roadway. The body was man-like, with arms and legs and a head. The witness estimated it around 6 foot tall. It crossed the highway quickly. By the time the witness passed the area, he had lost sight of it. He said he still could not believe what he had seen and had not told anyone else about the encounter before contacting me. He also mentioned that his uncle had once encountered an unknown aquatic humanoid while fishing in the bayou in southwest Mississippi in 1997. That being was described as dark in color with human-like features and a slimy-looking skin. It left the water and walked away. Now, according to the witness, his uncle was never the same after that sighting. Now, the I-55 case, the witness sounded sincere. There was limited information, but the description was direct and unusual. A 6-foot upright reptilian humanoid crossing a Louisiana highway late at night. So far, we have remained close to the swamp. Bipedal creatures, canal watchers, Loup Garou, and reptilian forms near roads and wetlands. But Louisiana high-strangeness does not stop at cryptids. Some reports move from the bayou into the sky, from the sky into the deeply personal realm of abduction, missing time, and physical traces. Now, the next case comes from New Iberia, Louisiana, in March 1988. The incident occurred on the midnight or shortly afterwards on March 24th, 1988. The witness was driving with a friend, Michelle, as a passenger. They had been visiting friends and were heading southeast on Bull Island Road in New Iberia, Louisiana. They had traveled only a mile or less when the car left the road and flipped over. The witness was pinned beneath the steering wheel with one hand trapped between the wheel and the dash. Later at the hospital, she learned she had suffered 3 broken ribs and a broken collarbone. Michelle suffered a broken nose and was unconscious, so she had no memory of the events that followed. So according to the witness, something extraordinary occurred sometime between the accident and their rescue, 2 to 3 hours later. She recalled being taken from the car and brought aboard a UFO. Later, she believed she had been placed back in the front seat of the vehicle. Her hand had been pinned between the steering wheel and the dash, and she had been wearing her mother's ring, which contained a child's birthstone. She stated that a 6-foot-tall alien being removed her from the car, got her aboard the craft by unknown means, and cut the ring off her finger. She never got it back. The being was described as between 5 foot 10 inches and 6 foot, with a human-like female form, well-shaped and shoulder-length golden brown hair. The being wore a white outfit with a formal Japanese-looking top, a small collar, and long sleeves. The witness had a strong impression that the craft, which she never saw from the outside, was on the ground beside her car. She also described undergoing procedures that she had not consciously remembered at the time. She also said muscle tissue had been removed from her upper right arm from the shoulder toward the forearm. The cut was only about 2 inches long, healed without stitches, and left a very light scar. On the inside of the arm, she had additional tissue samples they had been taken, leaving 3 dots in a line. There was also a 1-inch cut under her chin, which healed with a faint, almost invisible scar. Later, 2 passerbys found the wreck, kicked out the window, pulled both women from the car, and called an ambulance. But the witness's memory of the interval between the accident and the rescue remained deeply unusual. A roadside wreck, missing time, an entity, a craft nearby, a removed ring, and physical marks she associated with procedures performed aboard that craft. Now, in Louisiana, some roads lead into the swamp. Some roads lead to encounters. And in the next case, a road seems to lead to another time. This next account is one of the most intriguing Louisiana anomalies in my file. It was forwarded by Ken Mew, who personally interviewed one of the men involved and discussed the incident with him repeatedly over a period of 6 years. The event took place on October 20th, 1969 on Highway 167 between Abbeville and Lafayette. Now, on October 20th, 1969, 2 men had just finished lunch in Abbeville, Louisiana. LC and his business associate, whom we will call Charlie, were driving north along Highway 167 towards Lafayette, about 15 miles away. It was around 1:30 in the afternoon. The day was clear and cool with blue skies and a temperature around 60 degrees. Traffic was light. Ahead of them, they noticed what appeared to be an old turtleback-style automobile traveling very slowly. As they approached, they realized the vehicle looked decades old, but it was in showroom condition. Because the car was moving slowly, they decided to pass it, but before doing so, they slowed down to admire it. LC, sitting in the passenger seat, noticed a large license plate clearly marked with the year 1940. As they pulled alongside the vehicle, they saw the driver. She was a young woman dressed in clothing that appeared to be from the 1940s. She wore a hat with a long colored feather and a fur coat. A small child stood on the seat next to her, also wearing a heavy coat and cap. The windows of the old car were rolled up. Now, at first, the strange clothing in the antique car were simply unusual, but then Elsie and Charlie noticed the woman's expression. She looked frightened. She appeared lost, confused, and on the verge of tears. She looked back and forth as if she did not know where she was. Elsie called out from the passenger side and asked if she needed help. She nodded yes. He motioned her to pull over because her window was up and she seemed to have no difficulty hearing. He had to repeat the motion several times. The woman began pulling over. Elsie and Charlie continued ahead and pulled onto the shoulder in front of her. Then they turned to look back. The old car was gone. There was no side road nearby, no driveway, no place where the car could have turned or hidden. It just simply vanished. As the 2 men sat stunned on the shoulder of the highway, another driver pulled up behind them. This third man had been driving behind the old car. He ran up to Elsie and Charlie and demanded to know what had happened. Now, from his perspective, he had seen the newer car slowly pass the old car. He saw the newer car pull into the shoulder. He saw the old car begin to do the same. But for a moment, the old car obstructed his view from the newer car. Then the old car disappeared. All that remained was Elsie and Charlie's car on the shoulder. The three men searched the area for about an hour, but they found nothing. The third witness wanted to report the incident to the police, believing it involved missing people, but Elsie and Charlie refused. They had no idea where the woman, the child, or the car had gone. The third witness eventually exchanged contact information with them, and for years afterward, he remained in touch, calling to discuss the incident and to confirm that the others remembered it exactly as he did. Now, the case remains one of Louisiana's strangest road anomalies. A frightened woman and a child in a pristine 1940 automobile appearing on a 1969 highway, acknowledging that they needed help, beginning to pull over, and then vanishing in front of multiple witnesses. Now, that case shifts the atmosphere of this presentation. We move from creatures and physical encounters into something more elusive. Time, place, and the possibility that certain landscapes may briefly overlap with another moment. And now we move into New Orleans. New Orleans is one of the most paranormally charged cities in the United States. It is a city of cemeteries, old streets, layered cultures, spiritual traditions, folklore, tragedy, and survival. The next report begins as a simple morning walk during quarantine, but it becomes something the witness could not easily explain. Now, the witness lives in New Orleans and was born and raised in Louisiana. She described the state as a hotspot for the paranormal, voodoo, witchcraft, hauntings, vampire legends, bayou, werewolves, and other traditions. Now, during the quarantine period, the city had become unusually empty. Few people were out and about. Because the witness was struggling with depression and anxiety, she and a companion had begun taking morning walks around the city each day. One morning, the atmosphere felt different. The witness has extremely pale skin and said that throughout her life, people had compared her to Snow White and to vampires. This morning, she was wearing a black dress, and as she approached a street crossing, she saw a man on the other side who appeared to be approaching her. For reasons she could not explain, she suddenly had the thought that he was going to think she looked like a vampire. She noted that she had a strong intuition and gave an example involving a rescue kitten in which she felt compelled to take a receipt in case the cat's sex had been misidentified. Later, the intuition proved correct. And as she crossed the street and the sunlight hit her, the man suddenly released what she described as the largest wolf-like howl she had ever heard from any creature. The strange part was her reaction. She did not feel afraid. She did not even feel that it was especially strange at the moment. She simply crossed the street and never looked back. Later, reflecting on it, she wondered if he had somehow picked up her scent. She also acknowledged that New Orleans had homeless people, mentally ill individuals, and drug addicts. But the man may have been an ordinary person behaving erratically. But she could not shake the possibility that this was something more. In a city already filled with vampire lore, werewolf legends, and occult atmosphere, a wolf-like howl directed at a pale woman in black during an empty New Orleans morning felt like something pulled directly from the city's older shadow. Now, the response to that New Orleans post brought forward another disturbing account, this one connected to the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Now, this report is not a cryptid sighting. It's not a UFO case. It is a memory from someone who participated in post-Katrina recovery work and entered a house that seemed to harbor something far darker than ordinary tragedy. The respondent had a medical background and a certification that they rarely used, though they kept renewing it. After Hurricane Katrina, they volunteered thinking they would be helping survivors, but instead they were assigned to a grim recovery task after the water began to recede, locating houses where bodies remained inside. Now, they described the work as emotionally and physically difficult. They and a partner, whom the witness called Jay, were often assigned together. They would enter houses, search, and then they'd found a body. They'd mark the outside of the house with a large X. One day, they came to an old rundown shack in a badly damaged neighborhood. Immediately, the witness felt chills. They described the sensation as different from the feeling of finding a body. This was a deeper, more chilling sense that something was wrong. Against their instincts, they entered. Inside were strange bones hanging from the ceiling, beads, and carvings into the bare wood walls. The witness believed the bones may have been those from cats. The atmosphere suggested that unusual rituals or practices may have taken place there. Now, in the kitchen area, they discovered an elderly woman who had chained herself by the wrist to a beam. Her condition was deeply disturbing, yet the detail that most affected the witnesses was her face. It still appeared strangely animated with a fixed, unsettling expression. Then the witness heard an unearthly cackling noise. Their fight or flight response took over. The witness and Jay fled the house, quickly painted the X, and ran to the next location. So that night, they discussed what had happened. Jay had heard the cackling too. Both tried to rationalize it as wind or some other natural sound, but the memory stayed with the witness and continued to disturb them. Now, whether the house was connected to voodoo, hoodoo, ritual practice, mental illness, tragedy, or something else entirely, the witness remembered it as one of the most terrifying experiences of the Katrina recovery period. Now, that brings us to the broader culture and spiritual background of Louisiana, particularly New Orleans. It's impossible to discuss Louisiana high-strangeness without addressing the powerful and often misunderstood traditions of voodoo, hoodoo, conjure, root work, and spiritual practice. These traditions have been distorted by Hollywood, sensational fiction, and outsiders who reduced complex religious and folk systems to horror imagery. But in Louisiana, these traditions are part of the cultural landscape. They are not merely spooky decorations. They are history, survival, resistance, healing, fear, belief, and power. Now, the practice of voodoo has roots that reach back to Africa. The word itself is often associated with the ideas of God, the Creator, or the Great Spirit. In Louisiana, particularly New Orleans, voodoo and hoodoo developed through the blending of African spiritual traditions, Catholic symbolism, indigenous knowledge, European folk elements, and the painful history experience of slavery. When enslaved Africans came to the Louisiana Delta, many brought with them spiritual knowledge involving roots, herbs, bones, natural elements, and the belief that the world is alive with spirit. Over time, under pressure from slavery and religious suppression, traditions shifted, blended, and adapted. Hoodoo, conjure, and root work became part of the everyday life of many people. These practices often involved protection, healing, justice, spiritual communication, and attempts to influence one's circumstances through natural and spiritual means. Now, in New Orleans, voodoo became especially associated with figures such as Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo queen of New Orleans. Laveau is remembered as a powerful spiritual figure who blended Catholic devotion with African-derived spiritual practice, creating a uniquely Louisiana expression of voodoo. Even today, people visit her tomb seeking favors, blessings, and spiritual intervention. Reports also persist that Marie Laveau's apparition walking through the French Quarter. Now, the Gautier family Salt Cross account also reflects this belief system. When they woke one morning to find a cross of moist salt on the front porch, neighbors gathered and newspapers carried the story. In many places, such as an object might be dismissed as a prank, but in Louisiana, a salt cross in the language of hoodoo could be understood as a warning of trouble. This does not mean every strange object or every old house or every eerie feeling in Louisiana is supernatural. But it does mean that the symbolic environment of Louisiana is different. Signs have weight, places have memories, and folklore is not always treated as fiction. Now, tonight's reports take us across Louisiana's strange geography. We began in Westlake, where a large, dark, upright figure moved through the swamp and canal water as local animals reacted before the sighting occurred. We followed a young fisherman along the South Louisiana canal, where unseen movement, hollow drum beats, silence, and a shadowed eye turned an ordinary evening into a terrifying encounter. We climbed on an old Oil City derrick with a night watchman as something canine, bipedal, powerful, and howling circled below him until dawn. We watched a reptilian humanoid cross I-55 in the Tangipahoa Parish. We examined a new Iberia UFO abduction account involving a wrecked car, missing time, an entity, scars, and a missing ring. We traveled Highway 167 between Abbeville and Lafayette, where a terrified woman and child in a 1940 automobile appeared in 1969 and vanished before multiple witnesses. We walked through New Orleans during quarantine when a man let out a wolf-like howl at a pale woman in black. And we entered the aftermath of Katrina, where a recovery worker encountered a house filled with ritual signs, tragedy, and an unearthly cackle that two people heard and never forgot. What ties all these reports together? Water, isolation, old roads, cultural memory, spiritual atmosphere, animal reaction, witness fear, and the sense that Louisiana, the boundary between the ordinary and the impossible, is thin. Perhaps this is why Louisiana produces so many strange accounts. The landscape itself seems to hold stories. The swamp hides what it does not want to reveal. The road may not always lead to the same time. The city may remember what the living tries to forget. And the old names, Rougarou, Loup Garou, spirit culture, conjure, voodoo, hoodoo, still carry force. This has been Unexplained Louisiana. Now, please subscribe to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, activate the notifications, share this presentation with others in the Unexplained. If you have experienced something unexplained in Louisiana or elsewhere, I encourage you to document every detail you remember. Record the date, time, location, weather, directions of travel, duration of the event, physical characteristics, sounds, odors, lighting conditions, emotional responses, and the names of additional witnesses. Even details that initially seem insignificant may become important when compared to other reports. And you can submit your account to Phantoms and Monsters. Witness confidentiality and anonymity will be respected when requested. Now, your support helps us continue documenting witness testimonies, investigating unusual incidents, and preserving these accounts for future research. So let's start the question and answer, and please type your questions in all caps, please. Well, I see one. Okay, dagnabbit. There's an island in Louisiana swamp that is infested with many dogmen. There have been rumors of something like that in various places, but there's a lot of bipedal creatures that show up in Louisiana. I mean, like the honey swamp creature and other things. Is that a Bigfoot or is that a cryptid canine of some type? Nobody really knows. And all the stories seem to kind of blend into each other, but there's a lot of variations as well. Race fan. Yeah, Lon will be on Spaced Out Radio on Monday the 29th. I will be. Any other questions, folks? Anything that you can recall that may have something to do with Louisiana? Nightbird. Lon, does the Dogman have as long a history of being around in the U.S. as Bigfoot? I can't seem to find any old Native American reports about it. Well, you're right. There aren't many. There are a few that come from Pennsylvania, particularly from the Lenape tribes. In central Pennsylvania, in an area where we have had a lot of the dogman upright canine reports over the years. Now, sure, there are a lot of Bigfoot reports or a lot of Bigfoot culture in Native American culture, basically lore. But I think for the most part, when you do read into it, most of those accounts deal with a spiritual being as opposed to a flesh and blood being. I mean, I believe for a long time, and I still do, that Bigfoot and most cryptids are ultra-terrestrials or possibly an interdimensional being. Did the indigenous people feel the same? Did he feel as a creature from another realm, or did they believe it was actually a spirit? They very rarely go any deeper than that. So, but about the cryptid canines, yeah, there's not a lot of culture, American culture, associated with those beings. Michelle, do you think they took the ring after healing her to have a tether to keep track of her, or as a memento, if they ever took her again to provide proof they were friendly? That's an interesting question. Very well, maybe. It wouldn't be the first time. I've heard stories of rings and other jewelry being taken during some other type of encounter with a cryptid or even an alien being. So, yeah, maybe it's used as an identification piece. Absolutely. Lala Bright, you said before that witness testimony matters. Have you ever found a recurring detail in Louisiana cases that was so consistent across strangers that it changed the way you viewed the phenomenon? Well, more so the Rougarou or Loup Garou sightings, and I've had several of those over the years. Many times they seem to want to be seen for whatever reason. Now, is it something, a territorial thing? I don't know about that, but it does seem to want to let people know that it's there and that, they shouldn't mess with it. And that's primarily what goes on with most of the cases that I've read. Now, again, are these creatures who are there all the time, or are they ultra-terrestrial beings? I don't know. It may be different. I think they're tied to the culture, and that maybe they're just simply cryptid canines that are called something else someplace else. The whole Rougarou thing has kind of actually come from old, the old stories from the old world, especially in France. Cajun people were in Nova Scotia, and then they moved into the Louisiana area. There's a lot of Creole influence as well as Creole religions, and which voodoo, hoodoo, Santeria, and others are associated with. So there's quite a blending with all this. I have had cases where I have been involved with Obey and voodoo and other Creole religions that have kind of mixed a lot of different phenomena together. And I think for the most part, the Rougarou thing has become more of a symbol, more of an association between all the phenomena in Louisiana. Bianca Hand, the story of the man howling at the pale woman reminds me of the sightings of Count Saint Germain. I may one day do an entire show about Saint Germain. It's an interesting story. It's bizarre. It may even have some real deep roots into how this country was founded. There have been several accounts of this individual that just popped up at certain times, certain places, especially in early American history. It's a thought. I may actually do that. While I'm right, has any Louisiana case ever left you with the impression that the phenomena was intentionally controlling what evidence it allowed people to take away? Maybe not necessarily Louisiana, but I have had cases like that, and for areas where it happens at. The whole cryptid phenomenon involving bipedal creatures is just tied into the whole culture of the area. I even had an account. The account I was talking about with the dolls' heads and stuff in certain areas. There have been several swamps where that has showed up as well. Very similar type in description. Creatures that are moving through the swamp that people have no idea what they are. They do believe maybe a Rougarou, but then again, there's ritualistic phenomena associated with it as well. So, it kind of all ties together. And in most reports that I've received over the years, there always seems to be a connection between different types of phenomena. Anything else? Michelle, do you think the quarantine story that the man was actually a shape-shifting werewolf? Could have been. Again, the werewolf phenomena is a lot of times contained in the Rougarou story. Now, was it the same thing? I don't know. I have literally had reports over the years from Louisiana or in the bayou areas around the Gulf where people do swear that there's a shape-shifting type creatures in these areas. I've even heard in Arkansas where people say that they've seen Bigfoot shift into other creatures and possibly even back into humans. It's like a Bigfoot, a werewolf that's basically like a Bigfoot. I don't know. I've heard a lot of strange things over the years. Michelle, do you think the Louisiana swamps act as a natural window area where environmental conditions somehow increase the likelihood of high strangeness? It very well could be. I have seen cases where it does suggest that there may be portal activity, and that these dark, deep areas in the swamps may actually hold these types of portals or gateways. Yeah, that I have heard that before. And again, we run into the old Creole religion thing where some of that is associated with it. You don't see it mainstream that much. It isn't talked about within the New Orleans scene, but yeah, I think portal traveling comes into a lot of this. Michelle, do you think the woman in the Elsie case accidentally hit a vortex and skipped timelines and ended up in the same room, just a different time, and then shifted back, possibly? Yeah, that's a pretty bizarre case. I don't know. It's hard for me to explain, but then again, it does seem to be that type of phenomena where it was portal or a time slip, or the conditions just met the right. It was at the right time, right place. Just like what I went through when I was young in Gettysburg, and it seemed like a portal opened up, and I was looking into the battle itself. I have heard countless recounts of something similar to that in different situations. They don't last long, but they are a brief glimpse into the past. Alice Staring, Lon, have you talked to Dark Waters lately? Love his dog man and cat. I have not talked to James in quite a while. Occasionally, he'll get involved with something, contact me, and we'll talk. I don't know if he does as much of the Louisiana, New Orleans stories as he used to. But yeah, I used to have him on the show a lot. He had quite a recalling of a lot of events, especially during Katrina. And these cases where they were the recovery cases where they were finding bodies in homes and marking X's on the house for recovery. That's entirely true. And he had a story about an alligator man or some type of alligator creature that was moving through the New Orleans neighborhoods as well. So, yeah, I had to get in contact with James and see if we can come up with something. I would like to have him at least tell me some new things he has encountered or things he's heard about. He's quite a character, there's no doubt about that. Paula Bright, what's the darkest case involving rituals that still has no satisfying explanation? I've had personal cases involving ritual that are kind of private and more than anything, but I have been involved with a couple cases where there's been Creole religion type involvement. I had a woman not far from me whose grandmother was an Obe priestess who lived up in Brooklyn. She lived locally. Her grandmother died. Apparently, her grandmother had upset some people, and when she died, the curse that they inflicted on her came to the granddaughter. And that was quite a bizarre case. It was basically trying to clear whatever this was out of the home, and it was causing issues. And I had to do a deep dive into the whole thing. It was very knowledgeable. I mean, it was a very interesting bit of research, things I never knew about. So, but I have a lot of respect for the culture and the voodoo and the other Creole religions and rituals that even Santeria, which is used more so in the Latin communities, but it's still part of the same type of system. Nightbird, Lon, do you feel confident the 1973 Pascagoula, Mississippi UFO abduction of Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson was a true story? You know, early on, I thought there might have been some conjecture there. But as time went on, and of course, Calvin came forward and gave some more description, though I don't know if he embellished on it or what. It seemed to me that there's something definitely going on with that. I believe more than not that it actually did happen. There were other reports in the area of something very similar, but they didn't get, a lot of that didn't get out. I heard a lot of behind the scenes stuff that may have been associated with that, either the same beings that showed up that day or not. But yeah, I believe it really happened. There may be conjecture in there some places, but I think all in all, it was a true story. Anything else, folks? I see Nightbird just put something up. Lon, are you still getting any big bird or pterodactyl sightings? Occasionally. We will occasionally. Most of those sightings, for the most part, come out of the upper Midwest. A lot of that was associated with the Chicago Mothman sightings and in that area as well. Never did know if they were associated with that, but there have been some pretty interesting cases over the years, but lately I don't think I've received anything of much substance. Though I do believe there is some type of time slip or something involved with that. I mean, are these indigenous beings that have a flyway that move, like some people suggest, they move up from Mexico and into the upper Midwest? And look, we have sightings here in Pennsylvania as well. So, you know, I don't know the whole story on that, but yeah, it's and I did. Oh, and I see Marla wrote up there. I love Thunderbird stories. I did post some Thunderbird stuff this past week, so if you want to go back and check that out, I may do a series on Thunderbirds at some point. Show on Minnesota. I'll see what I can do. Minnesota is one of those states you don't get a lot, but when you do get one, it's usually pretty interesting. So I'll see what I can find. Okay, folks. So until next time, remain observant, trust your instincts, and remember that the world around us may be far stranger than what we have been led to believe. So have a nice evening. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday. Good night.